Imagine this, you're sitting at your desk, staring at the accolades you've collected over the years, degrees, promotions, maybe even an Employee of the Year trophy. Everything around you screams, success. Yet deep down, there's a gnawing emptiness. You can't explain it, but you feel stuck, like you're running a race where the finish line keeps moving. Sound familiar? It's the kind of struggle most of us don't talk about because, let's face it, admitting that success isn't enough feels ungrateful. But what if that feeling isn't failure at all? What if it's your mind whispering that the rules you've been playing by aren't designed for your happiness? Let me ask you this. How often do you find yourself doing things just to avoid upsetting someone? Or saying yes, because you're afraid of what might happen if you say no? It's a trap we all fall into, chasing approval like it's the golden ticket to a meaningful life. But here's the twist. What if being liked by everyone is the very thing holding you back? Crazy thought, right? That's the kind of radical perspective this book, the courage to be disliked, throws at you like a bucket of cold water. And trust me, once you dive into its ideas, there's no going back. This isn't your typical self-help fluff about staying positive or manifesting your dreams. Nope, this is about flipping the script entirely. It's based on the philosophies of Alfred Adler, a psychologist who believed happiness doesn't come from success, wealth, or even being loved. Instead, it's about something much scarier. The courage to be yourself, even if that means people won't like you. Yeah, Adler said it, being disliked is actually good for you. Chew on that for a second. The book is a conversation between two characters, a philosopher and a young man, both grappling with big questions like, what's the meaning of life? And, why am I so miserable even when things are going well? It's like eavesdropping on a deep, late-night debate, but one that leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about happiness and success. And let me tell you, this isn't just intellectual fluff. It's practical. It gives you tools to break free from the constant need for validation and start living a life that's truly yours. Think about this. What if the reason you're exhausted isn't that you're not working hard enough, but that you're working on all the wrong things? Imagine a painter spending years perfecting their craft, only to realize they've been painting someone else's vision. That's how most of us live, trapped in a life designed by other people's expectations. But here's the kicker. The path to freedom is not easy. It's messy, uncomfortable, and yeah, it involves rejection. But the reward? Oh, it's worth it. Imagine waking up every day knowing you're living your truth, not someone else's version of it. Now, you might be wondering, who are these authors and why should you care? Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga are the masterminds behind this book, blending Adler's century-old theories with modern storytelling. They've taken ideas that could easily feel like a psychology lecture and turned them into something anyone can relate to. It's like having a mentor who's both wise and brutally honest. Someone who tells you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear. So here's the deal. Over the next few minutes, we're going to unpack some of the most mind-blowing ideas from this book. By the end, you'll not only understand why the need to be liked is sabotaging your happiness, but also how to break free from it. But fair warning, this isn't for the faint of heart. It's going to challenge you, maybe even make you a little uncomfortable. Are you ready for that? Because once you see the world through this lens, there's no going back. Chapter 1. The Pillars of Adlerian Psychology. Picture this. A young woman scrolling through social media late at night, her eyes darting between photos of friends traveling to exotic locations, landing dream jobs, and announcing engagements. Her stomach tightens as she compares her own life. A decent job, a small apartment, a few close friends. The logical part of her knows she's doing fine, but the emotional part whispers, why am I not enough? It's a scenario most of us can relate to, a moment when our insecurities bubble to the surface, magnified by the endless scroll of other people's highlight reels. Alfred Adler would look at this scene and say, that's not failure. That's a misunderstanding of what life is really about. Adler's philosophy challenges the idea that our worth is tied to comparison. He saw the inferiority complex, feeling less than others, not as a flaw but as a natural part of being human. Think about it. No one starts out walking, running, or even talking. Every achievement begins with struggle, with a sense of lacking something. To Adler, this gap between where we are and where we want to be isn't a trap. It's a launchpad. He argued that striving for improvement, not perfection, is what drives personal growth. It's not about being better than others. It's about being better than the version of yourself from yesterday. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Unlike Freud, who believed our past traumas dictate our future, or Jung, who emphasized a deep dive into the collective unconscious, Adler flipped the script. He argued that we're not prisoners of our past. Imagine life as a movie. Freud would say your childhood writes the script, but Adler? He'd hand you the pen and say, write the ending you want. His philosophy is rooted in teleology, the idea that our actions are driven by goals rather than causes. Think about a student burning the midnight oil to ace an exam. Not because they love caffeine and textbooks, but because they're driven by the goal of graduating and building their future. Let's circle back to that young woman scrolling through her feed. Under Adler's lens, her discomfort isn't a sign of failure but a nudge, a clue pointing to her unmet goals. Maybe she dreams of exploring new places or finding deeper relationships but hasn't taken the steps to pursue them yet. Adler would encourage her to see that feeling of inferiority as a compass, not a condemnation. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, she could ask herself, what do I really want, and what's one small step I can take toward it? Here's another twist. Adler believed that our interactions with others are a mirror reflecting our beliefs about ourselves. Ever notice how some people seem to shine brighter when they're building others up, while others shrink into bitterness or envy? Adler would say it all boils down to how they interpret their sense of belonging. If you believe the world is a hostile competition, you'll act accordingly. But if you see yourself as a valuable part of a larger community, your actions shift from tearing others down to lifting them and yourself higher. This philosophy is revolutionary because it hands power back to the individual. It's not about blaming your parents, your upbringing, or even your current circumstances. It's about owning the choices you make every day. Take a moment to imagine what that kind of freedom feels like. No longer tethered to the weight of what others think, no longer stuck in the rut of I can't because. Instead, you're steering the ship, deciding where you want to go and how to get there. Adler's ideas aren't just theoretical. They're practical, grounded in everyday life. He invites us to rethink how we define success and failure. Instead of measuring our worth by external benchmarks, he asks, what do you truly value? It's a question that sounds simple but cuts to the core of how we live. For the woman comparing herself to her friends, Adler's perspective might shift her focus. Rather than chasing someone else's dream, she might realize she values creativity or deep, meaningful conversations. And here's the magic. Once she aligns her actions with her values, the comparison game loses its grip. Let's take this one step further. Adler's focus on personal agency doesn't mean you're alone in the journey. Far from it. He emphasized the importance of community, not in a superficial networking sense, but as a space for mutual contribution. Think of it like a garden. You plant seeds not just for your own nourishment but for the ecosystem to thrive. When you focus on what you can give, whether it's kindness, support, or expertise, you often find that you've received far more in return. So what does all this mean for us? It means we're not defined by our past, our insecurities, or even our mistakes. We're defined by the goals we set and the actions we take. The next time you find yourself caught in a spiral of self-doubt or comparison, try reframing it through Adler's lens. Ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to teach me? How can I use it to grow, to contribute, to create the life I want? And here's the kicker, you don't need permission to start. Your life isn't a draft waiting for someone else's approval. It's a masterpiece in progress, and the brush is in your hands. Chapter 2. The Courage to Change. Picture a young entrepreneur named Amir. He's brilliant, ambitious, and full of ideas. But every time he gets close to launching his dream project, he pulls back. His mind fills with doubt. What if it fails? What if people laugh at me? What if I'm just not good enough? On the surface, Amir blames practical obstacles, timing, funding, competition. But deep down, he knows the real reason. A voice from his past. Growing up, his father, though well-meaning, was quick to criticize. You'll never get it right if you keep making mistakes, he'd say. Those words stuck, wrapping themselves around Amir's potential like chains. holding him back from taking risks, from trying, from failing, and most importantly, from succeeding. Amir's story might sound familiar because we all carry voices from our past. They come from parents, teachers, or experiences that shaped how we see ourselves. Adler's philosophy turns this narrative on its head. He believed that the past is not a script carved in stone but a story we tell ourselves, and stories can be rewritten. The courage to change starts with recognizing this simple but powerful truth. The past influences us, but it doesn't define us. Think about how often we hear phrases like, "I'm this way because of what happened to me." It's tempting, isn't it? Blaming the past offers a convenient escape from the responsibility of change. Adler called this a lifestyle choice, a subconscious way of justifying inaction. If Amir believes his fear of failure is his father's fault, then he doesn't have to confront it. But here's where Adler offers a radical perspective. That belief isn't a fact. It's a choice, and choices can be unmade. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path is well-worn, familiar, and safe but leads nowhere new. The other is untamed, uncertain, and a little scary but holds the promise of something better. That second path is what Adler invites us to take. It's the path of teleology, the idea that our lives are shaped not by where we've been but by where we're going. Goals, not causes, drive our actions. For Amir, that means shifting his focus from what he's afraid of to what he wants to achieve. Let's dig deeper into this. When Amir pauses to reflect, he realizes his fear isn't just about failure. It's about rejection. Somewhere along the way, he equated mistakes with losing love and approval. Adler would encourage him to challenge this belief. He might ask, what's the worst that can happen if you fail? Would it really mean you're unworthy? Or is that just a story you've been telling yourself? Questions like these are powerful because they force us to confront the gap between our fears and reality. Here's where things get transformative. Once Amir identifies the limiting belief, failure equals unworthiness, he can begin to rewrite it. He starts small, launching a side project instead of a full-scale business. At first, the fear is overwhelming. But when things go wrong, as they inevitably do, something surprising happens. No one mocks him, the world doesn't end, and he realizes he can handle setbacks. Each misstep becomes a lesson, a stepping stone instead of a roadblock. Slowly, the chains loosen. This is the essence of the courage to change. Stepping into the unknown despite the stories your past has written for you. And it's not just about professional goals. Think about relationships. How often do people sabotage connections because they fear repeating old patterns? Maybe they cling too tightly, afraid of abandonment, or push people away to avoid vulnerability. Adler's philosophy offers a lifeline here too. By focusing on what kind of relationship they want to build, one rooted in mutual respect and trust, they can start behaving in ways that align with that vision, even if it feels unnatural at first. Let's pause for a moment and bring this closer to home. What's a belief you've carried about yourself for years? Maybe it's, I'm not good at public speaking, or I can't trust people because I've been hurt before. Now ask yourself, is that belief helping me, or is it holding me back? Adler's philosophy challenges us to see these beliefs not as truths but as choices we can re-examine and, if necessary, let go. To make this practical, let's try a simple exercise. Write down one fear or limiting belief that's been holding you back. Now, next to it, write a goal you've been avoiding because of that belief. For example, if your belief is, I'm not creative, your goal might be, start painting again. Finally, take one small action toward that goal today, no matter how imperfect. Maybe it's buying a sketch pad, signing up for a class, or just doodling for 10 minutes. The key is to act because action, no matter how small, is the antidote to fear. Amir's story doesn't end with a dramatic overnight success. It's a journey. He learns that courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to move forward despite it. And as he keeps moving, the fear gradually fades into the background, replaced by something much more powerful, momentum. He starts to believe in his ability to adapt, to grow, to succeed on his terms. That's the beauty of Adler's philosophy. It doesn't promise an easy road, but it offers a roadmap. The past may cast long shadows, but it doesn't have to block the light ahead. The courage to change isn't about erasing what's behind you. It's about reclaiming your power to choose what comes next. So, what's the story you've been telling yourself, and are you ready to rewrite it? Because that first step, the one you've been putting off, that's where the real change begins. Chapter 3. Freedom Through Responsibility. Imagine a man named Rami. He's in his late 30s, stuck in a job he doesn't love, and constantly complaining about his life. His friends hear the same refrain every week. If only my boss weren't so unreasonable. If only I'd been given the same opportunities as others. If only things were different. The if-onlys become a shield, protecting Rami from a difficult truth. His dissatisfaction isn't just about external circumstances. It's about his unwillingness to take responsibility for his own happiness. Alfred Adler's perspective would challenge Rami to rethink his situation entirely. According to Adler, freedom isn't the absence of constraints but the willingness to own your role in shaping your life. True happiness, he argued, comes not from controlling external conditions but from taking responsibility for your choices, your emotions, and your responses to the world around you. It's a concept that feels both liberating and terrifying. On one hand, it's empowering to realize you have control over your life. On the other, it's daunting to acknowledge that blame shifting and excuses are no longer an option. This is where many people stumble. They resist the very autonomy that could set them free. Why? Because freedom comes with accountability, and accountability can be scary. Think about it. When something goes wrong, isn't it easier to blame the weather, the economy, or someone else's behavior? Adler saw this tendency as a form of avoidance, a way to dodge the discomfort of facing ourselves. But in dodging discomfort, we also dodge growth. Let's return to Rami. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day at work, a close friend finally confronts him. "What are you going to do about it?" she asks, cutting through his litany of complaints. Rami is caught off guard. He spent so long rehearsing why things are unfair that he's never stopped to consider his role in the situation. The question nags at him, and over the next few weeks he starts to reflect. What if his boss's behavior isn't the real issue? What if the real issue is that he's stayed in a job that doesn't align with his values? Adler's philosophy suggests that this moment, when the blame shifts inward instead of outward, is where transformation begins. Rami realizes he has two choices: continue playing the victim or take responsibility for creating the life he wants. It's not an easy realization, but it's a necessary one. Slowly, he starts taking small steps. He begins researching other career paths, updating his resume, and even taking an evening course in a field that excites him. The work is hard, and progress is slow, but something unexpected happens. He starts to feel a sense of control over his life. For the first time in years, he feels free. This journey from victimhood to empowerment isn't unique to Rami. It's a universal experience, one that Adler's philosophy speaks directly to. Adler believed that we are not passive recipients of life's events but active participants. He rejected the idea that external circumstances dictate our happiness. Instead, he argued that happiness is a byproduct of taking responsibility for how we live, love, and contribute to the world. But this level of autonomy comes with a price. Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, described freedom as a burden, what he called condemned to be free. When we accept responsibility for our choices, we can no longer hide behind excuses. The safety net of blaming others is gone, leaving us to face the weight of our decisions. And yet, it's this very weight that makes freedom meaningful. Without it, life feels directionless, like a ship adrift without a captain. Consider a simple example. A friend cancels plans at the last minute. It's easy to feel frustrated, even angry, blaming them for ruining your evening. But Adler would invite you to step back and ask, why am I upset? Is it really about the canceled plans? Or is it about unmet expectations? And more importantly, how can you take responsibility for your own experience? Maybe it's an opportunity to explore a hobby you've been putting off, or to spend time reflecting on what you value in relationships. The shift is subtle but profound. From reacting to choosing, from feeling powerless to feeling empowered. This philosophy isn't about ignoring external challenges. Life throws curveballs: loss, illness, setbacks. But Adler's point is that we always have a choice in how we respond. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack. Blaming the weight won't make it lighter, but adjusting how you carry it or choosing to set it down might. Responsibility is like that. It's not about avoiding difficulty, but about deciding how you'll face it. To bring this closer to home, consider your own life. Are there areas where you feel stuck, frustrated, or dissatisfied? What role might you be playing in keeping things as they are? It's a tough question, but it's also a freeing one. When you stop waiting for others to change and start focusing on what you can change, the path forward becomes clearer. Let's make this practical with a simple exercise. Take out a piece of paper and divide it into 2 columns. On the left, list the things in your life you're unhappy about, big or small. On the right, write 1 action you could take to address each issue, no matter how small. Maybe you can't change a toxic work environment overnight, but you can start by setting boundaries or exploring other opportunities. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Rami's story doesn't end with him landing his dream job and living happily ever after. Life isn't that neat, but he does find something more valuable, a sense of agency. By taking responsibility for his choices, he discovers that happiness isn't about avoiding hardship, but about embracing the freedom to shape his own destiny. Adler's philosophy invites all of us to do the same. It's not easy to accept responsibility. It requires humility, courage, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But on the other side of that discomfort lies a profound sense of freedom. The kind of freedom that comes not from escaping life's challenges, but from meeting them head-on, knowing that you have the power to choose your path. So, ask yourself, what responsibilities are you avoiding? What might happen if you stopped blaming external factors and started owning your role in your own happiness? The answers might surprise you, but more importantly, they might set you free. Because true freedom isn't about what happens to you. It's about what you choose to do with it. Chapter 4. Dismantling the desire to be liked. Meet Layla, a diligent team member in a bustling marketing agency. Her colleagues adore her because she never says no, extra tasks, late nights, even covering for others' mistakes. But behind the polite smiles, Layla feels exhausted and resentful. She's caught in a vicious cycle. The more she does to win approval, the less appreciated she feels. Every criticism, no matter how small, feels like a personal failure. And yet, the idea of disappointing someone terrifies her more than the sleepless nights and mounting stress. Layla's experience is all too common. We live in a world where being liked is often equated with being worthy. Social media amplifies this dynamic, reducing self-esteem to likes and followers. But Adler saw this desire for approval not as a virtue but as a trap. To him, the relentless need to please others was a form of self-enslavement. His antidote? A profound yet simple idea he called the separation of tasks. The separation of tasks begins with a question. Whose problem is this? Adler argued that much of our suffering comes from taking responsibility for things that don't belong to us. Layla, for instance, feels responsible for her colleagues' opinions of her. But according to Adler, their opinions are their tasks, not hers. Her only task is to do her job well and act in alignment with her values. The moment she starts prioritizing how others perceive her, she steps into their territory, abandoning her own. This concept can feel revolutionary in its simplicity, but it's far from easy to practice. Let's follow Layla as she begins to apply Adler's principles. One day, her manager assigns her yet another last-minute project. Her instinct is to agree without hesitation, but something stops her. She takes a deep breath and says, "I'd love to help, but I'm already at capacity. Can we discuss prioritizing my current tasks instead?" The room falls silent. Layla's heart pounds. She's sure her manager will be furious, that her colleagues will think she's lazy. But to her surprise, the manager nods, acknowledging her workload. That evening, for the first time in weeks, Layla leaves the office on time. The world doesn't end, and she realizes she's been carrying a burden that was never hers to bear. Adler's philosophy isn't about abandoning kindness or consideration. It's about understanding where your responsibilities end and someone else's begin. Think of it like this. Imagine you're carrying a backpack filled with rocks. Some rocks are yours, your values, your actions, your choices. Others belong to other people, their opinions, their reactions, their expectations. If you try to carry everyone else's rocks, you'll eventually collapse under the weight. The separation of tasks is about setting those extra rocks down, trusting that others can carry their own. But why is this so hard to do? Part of the difficulty lies in fear of rejection, conflict, or being seen as selfish. Layla, for instance, had spent years equating no with failure. Adler, however, would challenge this mindset, asking, whose approval are you living for? And what price are you paying for it? The truth is, the pursuit of universal approval often comes at the expense of authenticity. In trying to be everything to everyone, we lose sight of who we are. This brings us to a deeper aspect of Adler's philosophy, the courage to be disliked. It's a phrase that feels counterintuitive. After all, who wants to be disliked? But Adler's point isn't that we should seek out disapproval. It's that we should stop fearing it. Consider this: every meaningful choice in life, whether it's standing up for your beliefs, pursuing a passion, or setting boundaries, will inevitably invite criticism. The question isn't whether people will judge you. It's whether you'll let that judgment define you. Let's pause here and reflect. Are there areas in your life where you're prioritizing others' opinions over your own well-being? Maybe it's staying silent in a meeting to avoid conflict, saying yes to a favor you don't have time for, or pursuing a career path to please your family. What would it look like to separate your tasks from theirs? What might change if you focused on what truly matters to you, regardless of how others might react? To make this actionable, try a small experiment. The next time you're faced with a decision, ask yourself, am I doing this because it aligns with my values, or because I want to be liked? If it's the latter, consider what it would mean to choose differently. Start small. Maybe it's declining an invitation to an event you're not excited about, or sharing an honest opinion instead of agreeing to fit in. Notice how it feels. At first, it might be uncomfortable, even scary. But over time, you may find a sense of liberation in living authentically. Returning to Layla, her journey isn't without challenges. There are moments when she slips back into old habits, moments when the fear of disapproval creeps in. But each time, she reminds herself of Adler's wisdom. Her task is to live in alignment with her own principles, not to manage others' perceptions. Gradually, she notices a shift. She feels less stressed, more confident, and surprisingly more respected. By focusing on her own tasks, she creates space for others to respect her boundaries and even reflect on theirs. Adler's message is ultimately one of empowerment. The courage to be disliked isn't about being defiant or dismissive. It's about prioritizing authenticity over approval. It's about recognizing that you cannot control how others perceive you, and more importantly, that their perception isn't your responsibility. This shift in mindset can be transformative, freeing you to focus on what truly matters, living a life that's true to who you are. So, as we close this chapter, consider this: what rocks have you been carrying that don't belong to you? And what might happen if you set them down? It's a question worth sitting with, not just today, but every day. Because in letting go of the need to be liked, you just might find something far more valuable: freedom. Chapter 5. Building meaningful relationships. Picture a bustling tech startup led by Omar, a visionary CEO known for his drive, but also his cutthroat management style. Under his leadership, the company thrived financially but struggled with high employee turnover and low morale. Staff meetings often felt like battlefields where employees competed to outshine one another, vying for Omar's approval. While the company's profits grew, the relationships within it fractured, leaving a culture of distrust and burnout. One day, Omar attended a leadership workshop that introduced him to a radical concept: horizontal relationships. Unlike the hierarchical structures he was used to, horizontal relationships emphasize equality, mutual respect, and collaboration. Inspired, he decided to try an experiment. At the next team meeting, instead of his usual approach of ranking ideas and critiquing individuals, Omar encouraged open dialogue. He invited his team to collectively brainstorm solutions to a pressing problem, valuing every contribution equally. The results surprised him. Employees who had been silent in previous meetings started sharing innovative ideas. Collaboration flourished, and the team left the room energized rather than defeated. Omar began to realize that the company's success didn't have to come at the expense of its people. By fostering horizontal relationships, he could build a culture of mutual respect and shared purpose. Adler would applaud this transformation. In his philosophy, the purpose of life isn't about climbing a hierarchical ladder or proving superiority. It's about contributing to the community. Adler saw relationships not as power dynamics but as partnerships, where individuals come together to create something greater than themselves. This perspective challenges the societal obsession with status, which often leads to competition rather than connection. Take a moment to reflect on the relationships in your life. Are they built on mutual respect, or do they involve subtle power plays? Consider how often you compare yourself to others, whether it's in your career, social circles, or even within your family. Society conditions us to see relationships as zero-sum games. If one person rises, another must fall. But Adler's philosophy turns this idea on its head, suggesting that true fulfillment comes from horizontal connections where everyone stands on equal footing. The concept of horizontal relationships extends beyond personal interactions to societal structures. Think about the education system, for example. Too often, classrooms become arenas of competition, where students vie for top grades and accolades. But what if, instead, education emphasized collaboration? What if students were encouraged to learn from one another, valuing collective growth over individual achievement? This shift could create not only better learners but also better communities. Let's return to Omar's story. Over the next year, he implemented a series of changes inspired by Adlerian principles. Performance reviews became team-oriented, focusing on collective goals rather than individual rankings. He introduced mentorship programs, pairing senior employees with juniors to foster mutual growth. Slowly but surely, the company's culture shifted. Employees started celebrating each other's successes, and trust replaced competition. The company's financial growth continued, but this time, it was accompanied by a sense of shared purpose and camaraderie. Adler's emphasis on community and contribution isn't just about workplace dynamics. It's deeply personal. Imagine a parent who constantly compares their child to others, pushing them to achieve more, to be the best. While the intention might be love, the result is often pressure and resentment. Contrast this with a parent who encourages their child to explore their unique strengths and contribute those strengths to the world. The child grows up not with a fear of failure but with a sense of purpose. This philosophy can feel counterintuitive in a world that glorifies individualism and competition. But consider the toll that constant comparison takes on mental health. Social media exacerbates this, turning every aspect of life into a contest. Who has the best vacation, the most impressive job, the perfect family? Adler's ideas offer an antidote. Shift the focus from how do I measure up to how can I contribute. Here's a practical exercise to start fostering horizontal relationships in your own life. Choose one relationship, whether it's with a friend, colleague, or family member, and make a conscious effort to approach it with equality and respect. Instead of trying to prove a point or gain the upper hand, listen more than you speak. Acknowledge their perspective even if you disagree. Notice how this changes the dynamic. Over time, you might find that this approach not only deepens the relationship but also reduces your own stress. At its core, Adler's philosophy isn't just about improving relationships. It's about creating a sense of belonging. When we contribute to our communities, whether that's our workplace, family, or social circle, we fulfill a fundamental human need. But this contribution must come from a place of equality, not superiority. It's not about being the hero or the savior. It's about being a partner. As Omar discovered, building meaningful relationships requires humility and a willingness to let go of ego. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't tied to being better than others but to working alongside them. And when you shift your mindset in this way, something remarkable happens. Competition fades, and connection takes its place. So, what would it look like for you to embrace Adler's vision of horizontal relationships? How might your workplace, friendships, or family dynamics change if you focused on contribution over competition? The answers might surprise you, and as you start to apply these principles, you'll likely find that the rewards go far beyond personal satisfaction. You'll be building a foundation for a life rich in connection, purpose, and mutual respect, one that leaves behind the exhausting climb of hierarchies for the fulfilling path of shared humanity. Chapter 6. Living a Life of Courage. Imagine Maya, a teacher who spent years doubting herself. She avoided speaking up in meetings, hesitated to try new teaching methods, and dreaded parent conferences. Fear of criticism held her back at every turn. Then, one summer, she stumbled upon Adler's philosophy and decided to experiment. She started small, introducing a creative project in her classroom that she had been too timid to propose before. Some colleagues dismissed the idea as impractical, but Maya pressed forward. To her surprise, the project not only engaged her students but also earned her recognition from the principal. That experience marked the beginning of her journey toward living courageously. Maya's story is one of countless examples of how embracing freedom, responsibility, and contribution can lead to profound transformation. Adler's principles are not abstract theories. They're tools for crafting a life of meaning, but applying them requires intention and practice. This chapter will guide you through actionable steps to integrate these ideas into your daily life, offering exercises and real-world examples to inspire you along the way. The first step in living courageously is understanding that freedom begins with responsibility. Adler challenges us to take ownership of our choices and emotions, rejecting the temptation to blame others or our circumstances. One practical way to cultivate this mindset is through journaling. Each evening, take a few minutes to reflect on your day. Ask yourself, what choices did I make today? Did I act in alignment with my values? What emotions did I experience, and how did I respond to them? Over time, this practice can help you identify patterns and take greater control over your actions. Consider another story, this time of James, a small business owner. For years, James avoided difficult conversations with his employees, fearing conflict. As a result, his team became disengaged, and productivity suffered. Inspired by Adler's teachings, James decided to confront his avoidance. He scheduled one-on-one meetings with each team member, openly discussing challenges and inviting feedback. The process was uncomfortable at first, but it transformed his workplace. His employees felt heard, and James grew more confident in his leadership. James's journey highlights the importance of embracing discomfort. Living courageously doesn't mean eliminating fear. It means acting despite it. A helpful exercise to build this courage is to step outside your comfort zone intentionally. Start with something small, like striking up a conversation with a stranger or trying a new hobby. Gradually take on bigger challenges, reminding yourself that growth often lies just beyond fear. Another key principle of Adler's philosophy is contribution. Adler believed that a meaningful life is one rooted in service to others, where relationships are built on mutual respect rather than competition. To embody this principle, consider adopting a daily practice of contribution. Each morning, ask yourself, what can I do today to make someone else's life better? This could be as simple as offering a kind word, helping a colleague, or volunteering your time. Over time, these small acts of contribution can deepen your sense of purpose and connection. Let's revisit the story of Maya, who not only transformed her classroom but also inspired her students to adopt a similar mindset. She introduced a weekly gratitude circle, where students shared one way they had helped someone that week. The exercise fostered a sense of community and encouraged the children to see themselves as contributors. Maya realized that by modeling courage and contribution, she was empowering her students to do the same. To sustain these practices, it's crucial to set intentional goals. Adler's focus on teleology, the idea that our actions are driven by future-oriented goals, offers a powerful framework for personal growth. Begin by identifying 1 or 2 areas of your life where you want to grow. Write down specific, achievable goals for each area, along with the steps needed to reach them. For instance, if your goal is to build stronger relationships, you might set a goal to call one friend or family member each week. Review your progress regularly, adjusting your approach as needed. One final exercise to integrate Adlerian principles is mindfulness. Living courageously requires being present in the moment, fully aware of your thoughts and actions. Try a simple mindfulness practice, such as focusing on your breath for 5 minutes each day, or taking a mindful walk where you pay attention to the sights, sounds, and sensations around you. These moments of mindfulness can help you stay grounded and aligned with your values. As we draw this journey to a close, it's worth reflecting on the transformative power of Adler's ideas. Consider the stories of Maya, James, and countless others who've embraced the courage to be disliked. Their experiences remind us that this path isn't always easy, but the rewards, a life of freedom, responsibility, and connection, are unparalleled. This journey doesn't end here. Living courageously is a daily practice, one that requires ongoing commitment and self-reflection. There will be moments of doubt and setbacks, but each step forward is a victory in itself. So ask yourself, what small change can I make today to live more courageously? The answer to that question could be the beginning of your transformation. In the words of Adler, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the determination to act in spite of it. By taking responsibility for your life, contributing to your community, and prioritizing authenticity over approval, you can create a life of profound meaning and fulfillment. The choice is yours, so why not start now? Conclusion. The infinite ripple effect of courage. Imagine a quiet moment in a bustling cafe. A man named Daniel sits by the window, reflecting on how far he has come. Just a year ago, Daniel avoided conflict at all costs, trapped in the endless pursuit of approval. His life was dictated by others' expectations, career choices shaped by his parents, friendships sustained out of obligation, and a social media presence carefully curated to win likes. But today, Daniel feels a deep sense of peace. It wasn't an overnight transformation, nor was it without struggle, but his decision to embrace the courage to be disliked set off a chain reaction that reshaped his life and touched those around him. Daniel's journey is a microcosm of the powerful ripple effect courage can have. When one person chooses to live authentically, they give others permission to do the same. This is the essence of Adler's philosophy. A life of courage and contribution has the potential to transform not just the individual but entire communities. By taking responsibility for our choices, freeing ourselves from the chains of external validation, and building meaningful horizontal relationships, we become catalysts for positive change. Reflecting on this journey, one of the most liberating ideas Adler presents is that happiness is not something to be found. It is something we create through our actions. The constant pursuit of approval and perfection keeps us locked in a cycle of dissatisfaction. But when we release ourselves from these constraints, we uncover a deeper sense of fulfillment. Consider the story of Maya, the teacher who transformed her classroom by modeling courage. Her willingness to try new approaches not only redefined her career but also inspired her students to see themselves as capable contributors. Each act of courage created a ripple, touching lives far beyond her own. In a similar vein, James, the business owner, discovered that by addressing his fears head-on, he could build a workplace rooted in trust and mutual respect. The ripple effect extended to his employees, who began to take more ownership of their roles, leading to greater innovation and collaboration. James's story illustrates that living courageously is not about grand gestures, but about consistent, intentional actions that align with our values. Each step we take inspires those around us to take their own. This brings us to a profound truth. The courage to be disliked is not about seeking isolation or rebellion for its own sake. It is about prioritizing authenticity over approval and contribution over competition. It's about recognizing that true connection comes not from being liked by everyone but from being truly known by a few. Adler's philosophy teaches us to separate our tasks from those of others, freeing us to live according to our principles without carrying the weight of others' expectations. This shift, though challenging, opens the door to a life of freedom and meaning. Now consider the ripple effect on a larger scale. What if communities embraced Adler's principles? What if schools prioritized teaching children the value of contribution over competition, or workplaces encouraged employees to focus on collaboration instead of climbing the corporate ladder? The societal obsession with status and validation would give way to a culture of mutual respect and shared purpose. Such a world may seem idealistic, but change begins with individuals who choose courage over conformity. Let's return to Daniel sitting by the window in that cafe. His decision to live courageously has not gone unnoticed. His closest friends have remarked on how much more present and grounded he seems. One of his co-workers, inspired by Daniel's newfound confidence, has started setting boundaries at work, leading to a healthier work-life balance. Even Daniel's younger brother, who once felt overshadowed by him, has taken a step toward pursuing his own passion for music. Daniel didn't set out to inspire others, but by living authentically, he became a beacon of possibility for those around him. The question now turns to you. What would your life look like if you had the courage to be disliked? What opportunities for growth, connection, and fulfillment are waiting on the other side of fear? The journey toward courageous living is not without its challenges, but it is also deeply rewarding. It is a journey of self-discovery, where each step brings you closer to the person you were always meant to be. Take a moment to imagine the ripple effect you could create. How might your courage inspire a friend, a family member, or even a stranger? How might your decision to embrace freedom and responsibility transform not just your life but also the lives of those around you? These are not hypothetical questions, they are invitations. Invitations to step into a life of authenticity and purpose. As we close this exploration of Adlerian psychology and the transformative power of courage, remember that the choice is yours to make. The courage to be disliked is not about changing the world overnight, but about changing your world, one intentional step at a time. The journey may be long, but each step forward is a testament to your commitment to live authentically and contribute meaningfully. So, ask yourself once more, what would my life look like if I truly had the courage to be disliked? The answer lies not in the pages of a book or the words of a guide, but in your own actions. The choice to live courageously, free from societal and self-imposed constraints, is one that only you can make. And when you do, the ripples of your courage will spread farther than you could ever imagine.